Galatians 5:22 to 23. But the fruit of the Spirit is love. Friends, over the last 4 weeks, we've gone through a preaching series titled Life in the Spirit. And this past Sunday, I shared a message on the fruit of the Spirit, basically the character of Jesus, how the Spirit does a work in our lives as we abide in Him, as we walk in step with the Spirit each and every day. The Holy Spirit starts to transform us, make us new, and make us into the image of Jesus. We call it sanctification, or us becoming Christ-like. And as we live in the Spirit, walk by the Spirit, we start to look and behave and resemble Christ to this world. And what we want to do over the next week or so is dive into each one of these fruits of the Spirit and posture ourselves before Him and ask Him to make us more like Jesus as we explore each one of these characteristics and ask ourselves some reflective, devotional questions on how we can become more like Jesus. The first fruit that we'll look at is that of love. It should not surprise us that love is the first characteristic that we get in this list of virtues or these characters that Paul gives us in Galatians 5. John says that love is evidence that we know God. That the first fruit given to us is the evidence that we know God. If love is evident in our lives, John tells us it is evidence that we have a living relationship with God. Paul would often write saying that the outside world, the non-Christian, so to speak, would know those in the church. They will know that we belong to Christ if love is evident in our hearts. John 1 verse 4 says, "Dear friends, let us love one another because love is from God, and everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God, and the one who does not love does not know God because God is love." And so as we know God, as we abide in the vine, as we spend time with Jesus, as we are empowered by the Holy Spirit, the evidence of that is love in our hearts and in our lives, how we love one another and how we love God. Paul tells us and the letter that he writes to the Roman church that the Spirit of God has poured out His love upon us. He says in Romans 5, "This hope will not disappoint us because God's love has been poured out in our hearts through the Holy Spirit who was given to us." So as the Holy Spirit is given to us by Jesus, the Spirit of God is pouring out God's love into our hearts. And so this isn't a virtue or a characteristic that we need to muster up our strength and better love other people by our own goodwill or right behavior. Rather, this is embracing the love of Christ that has been made evident in our heart by the power of the Holy Spirit. And as we embrace the love of Christ, He will start to produce a love in our hearts out to those around us and to God the Father. You see, Spirit-led believers, those of us who have submitted our lives to Christ and have been saved by grace through faith, have the Spirit working in us, and we express a sincere love for other people. If we can't love other people, if you know and you look inside your own heart and there is not love, we probably have to question whether or not we are submitting to Christ and embracing the love that He has for us. Because as we embrace the love of Christ that is made evident in our lives by the work of the Holy Spirit, we cannot help but love Him in return and love those around us. And what we do as we abide with the Spirit, we start to express a love for God who first loved us. Friends, I believe that if you see God for who He really is, and we do that, we see God by the work of the Holy Spirit. And as we start to experience His love, you cannot help but respond in love and worship and adoration back to Him. Thomas Schreiner, the theologian, says love is the heart and soul of the Pauline ethic. For it is love that fulfills the law. It is the love of Christ that sets us free. It is the love of Christ that gives us life. It is the love of Christ that sends the Holy Spirit to come and live in our hearts and empower us to live kingdom lives in the here and now. This word for love that is given to us in the original Greek, it doesn't refer to kind of warm, fuzzy emotional feelings, but to a deliberate attitude of goodwill and devotion to God and to others. Love gives freely without looking at what others can give in return. God does not love us so that we give in return, and we should not love others so that we can get in return. And love gives without expecting anything back. And as we reflect on this fruit of the Spirit, love, ask ourselves the question today: am I motivated to do for others as Christ has done for me? As Christ freely pours out His love upon us, are we freely loving others in our lives without expecting anything in return? Friends, let's be men and women who have the fruit of love evident in our lives and in our community as we pursue the way of Jesus for the renewal of all things.